Live on WFLA Now. With a specialized degree in climate, Chief Meteorologist and Climate Specialist Jeff Berardelli is pioneering the way we look at climate and extreme weather. Welcome to Jeff's Climate Classroom, powered by ArmorView Window and Door.
All right, glad you can join me today, folks. This is a really important climate classroom. Now, you know, hurricane season has turned out to be a dud up until this point for a lot of the Atlantic Ocean, but things could eventually change, and it looks like things will start to get active in about a week and a half or so. But what we have been doing all summer is being part of a hurricane study between us and the Pacific Northwest Laboratory, the Department of Energy, the U.S. government, in looking into how our hurricane risk is going to change in the future. Now, I want to bring meteorologist Rebecca Barry into the mix here. She is joining me today, and we're going to be discussing this. But the results are shocking and astonishing, even for someone like me who's been, both following, been a meteorologist for, 30 years, and mostly in hurricane territory, and also a climate specialist as well with a degree in this. And I couldn't believe the results that we found. And I'll just tell you the first one, which is that it looks like we could see an increase, a 3 times increase in the number of major hurricanes that strike the Tampa Bay area. When you do studies, you never get results that are that robust, or at least very rarely, Rebecca.
Exactly. A lot of the studies that we do, the results are within the margin of error. And so it doesn't really tell you as much as you would like for it to tell you. So the fact that you did get such strong results, and you're going to be explaining how we got there. And so I'm monitoring the questions on our Facebook Live. And so if you have any questions for Jeff about this study in particular, especially, just go ahead and drop them in the comments, and we'll be able to answer and address those questions. And I also have the buzzer. I'm filling in for Val. So if Jeff gets too technical or starts talking too long, I can buzz him.
That's right. And I always encourage them to do that, because I want to keep this show going down a straight road rather than kind of veering off the path. So let's talk about this. So Rebecca, you remember last year we did a study with Columbia University, my alma mater, and what we looked into is, okay, Tampa hasn't been hit by a major hurricane in 100 years. So is that just luck, or is that the normal weather pattern around here? And in order to do that, we needed to simulate over 1 million hurricanes, so essentially 10,000 hurricane seasons or so, more than that.
Yeah,
more than that. In order to make sure that we were getting the average number of hurricanes that should form in a century. And again, I don't want to get too technical because I'm afraid of that buzzer there, but basically, just because we did not have any major hurricane strikes in the last 100 years, if you take the same climate and you are able to live over and over and over again for 100,000 of those 100-year periods, right? They wouldn't all be the same. There would be randomness. So sometimes you get hit by 2 or 3 major hurricanes. Sometimes you wouldn't get hit by a major hurricane for 500 years. In order to figure out what the average is, you just need to take the computer environment, the computer model environment, and then just keep rerunning it over and over and over and over again. Sometimes you get 3 major hurricanes, sometimes 1, sometimes 0, and eventually you come out with an average, okay? So that's why we did what we did last year. And what we found out, as you remember, is that this is just normal around here. We normally only get hit by a major hurricane in the Tampa Bay area once every 100 years, maybe once every 130 years, maybe once every 80 years, whatever it is, it's somewhere in that range, okay? So this year we decided to peer into the future. We said, okay, now we understand what's been going on in the past. It's just kind of the normal weather pattern around here because we're protected by geography. But what about our climate, right? It has changed dramatically. I mean, water temperatures are like 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit in the tropical Atlantic, warmer than they were just about 100 years ago, really just about 50 years ago, honestly. So that's got to have a big impact. And not only that, it's likely to just keep going up, at least for the next couple to few decades. So how is our hurricane risk going to change in the future? And so that's what we looked into this year. And in order to do it, we partnered with the Department of Energy, and we localized a hurricane study that they came out with last year. And like I said, Rebecca, the results are just astonishing. You've heard at least some of these results. As someone who's in the meteorology community, you were mentioning it before, usually we get it's like a 10% chance it'll be worse, or maybe 5% greater rainfall, but all the numbers that we found here are astonishing.
Yeah, they're all huge numbers, and they're all huge numbers that you can feel the impact of, especially with the focus on inland flooding this year from the National Hurricane Center. I found the rainfall rates to be really, really compelling when you were talking about that.
Yeah, and I think that is probably one of the more robust findings of this study. So first of all, you're looking at Hurricane Ian there. There's another view of Hurricane Ian, and that was, second, I think. Well, no, it was the most expensive hurricane in Florida history, and one of the most expensive hurricanes in U.S. history. And this study basically says that it looks like we're going to see a lot more hurricanes hitting Florida, especially, but the whole southeast coast potentially as we head towards the end of the upcoming century. So sometime after 2050, that's when we would see these numbers start to average out. So I guess, probably one of the things I want to show you first is just how the Atlantic Ocean is warming. Let me pull this up for you so you can see it. I mean, look at that trend since around 1980. We've seen a trend somewhere around, 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit warming in the tropical Atlantic. Warming waters are only one part of how a hurricane forms. Hurricane needs a lot of things to come together. We learned that this season, right? Because the waters are off the charts warm right now, and we're not seeing hurricane activity like you think we'd see. One of the things that we know this study doesn't tell us if we're going to see more or less hurricanes overall in the future, but it does tell us that we're likely to see more intense hurricanes. So I see, do you want to ask me a question?
Yeah, we have a question.
Sure.
This one's from Edward Ponder on our Facebook page. He's asking, what do you consider a direct hit?
It would be, so what we did was in this study, we broke it down to the county by county level. So basically we looked at the later part of the century, 2066 through 2100. And the study was done by the Pacific Northwest Laboratory of Department of Energy. And we simulated all these hurricanes in the past climate, so from 1980 to 2014, and the future climate from 2066 to 2100. And then we looked at how the incidence of major hurricane winds, tropical storm force winds, maximum hurricane winds, and maximum rainfall rates were changing in each one of these counties. So it's literally at the county level. And then what I did is I averaged all the numbers from the Tampa Bay area into one general average. But it turns out that the hurricane risk is going to increase more in Sarasota County and Polk County than it's going to increase in Hernando County and Citrus County, right? But the average of that, I'm going to show you right now. So let me put this graphic up on the screen, and the numbers are astounding.
And there were some audio issues when you took just the shot of yourself. So maybe we'll keep it on the two shots.
That's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. That makes sense. Actually, there's no banner on that one, so I clearly made a technical error. That was me. Okay, so take a look at this right here. This is what the study says. If you compare 1980 to 2014, the historical period, with 2066 to 2100, which is the future period, this is what you find. Now, remember, these are the exact same nine state-of-the-art global climate models that were used for this study. What was found is that in the future period, you get a 215% increase in the incidence of major hurricanes on average in each one of the Tampa Bay counties. Okay? It's a little bit more in Sarasota and Polk County. It's a little bit less when you go to Hernando and Citrus County. But the average numbers is somewhere around 250% increase. So what does that mean? Let me put this up together for a second of us. It means that on average, we get a major hurricane once a lifetime here in the Tampa Bay area, just once. But in the future climate, just a few decades from now, it'll be 3 times a lifetime. That is a tremendous increase in major hurricanes. So that makes sense, right? That we would see more major hurricanes, but not quite as many more hurricanes. Because remember, we're not expecting necessarily more storms overall. And this is specific landfalling storms to our area. We're just expecting that the storms at landfall could be stronger. So notice it's a 75% increase. No, not even a 2 times increase in the number of hurricanes that hit. A 39% increase in tropical storms. So you can see that we're expecting more stronger storms, but not necessarily more weaker storms. But there is an uptick in tropical storms, at least here. And again, these are just landfalling storms. There may be less storms in the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean, which compensates for the extra storms that are making landfall here. We see a maximum wind speed increase of 16%. It may not sound like much, and some of our counties actually end up near 20%. So let me bring you back up for this. a 20% increase in wind speeds. Well, if you had a hurricane that hit with 150 mile an hour winds, Ian had 150 mile an hour winds. Later this century, that same storm could have winds of 180 miles an hour. The damage potential is 4 times greater with a storm of 180 miles an hour than a storm of 150 miles an hour. And then the last one, Rebecca, which you mentioned, maximum rainfall rate. So what does that mean? Well, if the other day at Tampa Airport, we had 3 to 4 inches an hour of rainfall. It was close to 4 inches an hour. So you get 4 inches an hour, well, that's 6 inches an hour in the future. Think about all the flooding that we had in the Tampa Bay area the other day. It was mainly because of strong rainfall rates. A lot of rain falling in a very short period of time. If you add 50% onto that, well, think about how much more flooding there would have been. So these numbers are just staggering. Okay. Now, I think it's worth mentioning to everybody at home that this study may not be right. All models are imperfect. There's no way it's going to be exactly right. But models are not good at figuring out specifics, but generalities and trends they're very good at.
And there are several comments in the comment section talking about the how bad models sometimes do. Right. And I think that what you're addressing now is that we're looking at trends, not necessarily a specific storm.
That's right, because remember, we're not trying to say that a major hurricane is going to hit in 2066. It's going to hit Manatee County. It's going to have winds of 180 miles an hour. We're just saying we ran about 500,000 simulations of hurricanes in a future climate over and over and over and over again. Thousands and thousands of hurricane seasons so that we could arrive at an average number of hurricanes that would hit and major hurricanes that would hit in the future. So you're right. It's extraordinarily hard to predict specifically what's going to happen, even just 2 weeks out.
Yeah.
But what climate models are really good at is forecasting a general trend and, in general, how much warmer it'll be in the future. So, for instance, the climate models that we ran back in the 1980s and 1990s, they forecast almost exactly what our global temperatures would be today. I mean, they were very precise, like really good, like surprisingly good at forecasting that general warming trend. But to forecast exactly where a drought's going to happen, or exactly where, a flood's going to happen, or exactly the area that's going to get the biggest uptick in heat waves, those granular things and specific things become more difficult. So the people that are, just to kind of sum this up, the people that are writing these comments, rightfully so, yes, sometimes our computer models can't predict 8 days out. How can we possibly predict what's going to happen later in the century? Two completely separate things that we're talking about. You are correct. Our computer models are really bad at forecasting specifics, or not as good as we'd like them to be, but better than they were.
Yep.
But predicting, just generally speaking, are we going to see more or less hurricanes? Is it going to be warmer or colder? Are hurricanes going to be weaker or stronger? That becomes fairly less complicated for these climate models to forecast. But there are more caveats as well, and we're gonna talk about those as well. You want to do that now, or do you want to talk more about numbers?
Let's go ahead and go with the caveats, because people are really curious about that.
Okay. So let me bring up 2 graphics to show you why we think, and then we can talk about the caveats. And I'm going to be honest with you. First of all, you should check out the article on our website, because I really do talk about how some of the results here you need to really, I wouldn't say you take them with a grain of salt. You don't take them with a grain of salt. There's some truth to them, but you have to really contemplate them. They're not going to be exact, because no computer models are right all the time, but they're useful most of the time. Okay. All right. So this is what the computers say. And let me bring this graphic up for you. So we use 9 state-of-the-art global climate models, not just one model, but 9. And the consensus of them say that we're going to see robust warming in the eastern tropical Pacific Ocean, okay? And what that's going to do is put more energy into the atmosphere, sending atmospheric waves of energy, we call them Rossby waves, into the Atlantic Ocean. And that, by sending those atmospheric waves from the Pacific into the Atlantic, it changes circulation patterns in the Atlantic Ocean. So here's what ends up happening. The circulation pattern is such that we end up with storms being more likely to move north-northwest towards the southeast coast of the U.S. That's what the computer models say is going to be a result of global warming. Robust warming in the eastern Pacific, a change in circulation patterns in the Atlantic, such that these storms move closer to the coast. Now, here's the ironic part. You would think, and by the way, they also say that wind shear is going to weaken near the coast as well. So it's a double whammy. Storms heading towards the coast. Oh, and by the way, the wind shear weakens, so storms can get stronger. But here's the interesting thing. I think most people would automatically think, oh, he's talking about climate change, it's warming, and hurricanes are going to be stronger because it's warming. That's not what's being said here. What's being said here, actually, it's not really a direct result of the warming. It's a direct result of the circulation changes from the warming, which is not something that I think a lot of meteorologists and climatologists would have expected. They would have thought, oh, stronger hurricanes, direct result of there being warmer water and stronger hurricanes. Actually, the reason for the excess landfalls in the southeast is more because of circulation changes. And that's what the forecast is calling for. Now, I just want to go back to one graphic, and there's a reason why I'm doing this. Very important, actually. That warming that is projected to occur, let me go to this graphic, in the Eastern Pacific, that is something that is really, really, really controversial right now. What a lot of the long-term models say is we should see a lot of warming in the Eastern Pacific, and we should already see that. Actually, the opposite's been occurring. It's been cooling in the Eastern Pacific. We're seeing more La Niñas than we are El Niños, and overall, the trend is for cooling. So there's a big debate in the climate science community about whether this robust warming that's being predicted by the climate models is, in fact, going to come true later in the century. So that's why I say you have to really contemplate these particular findings, because if the consensus of these 9 computer models and a lot of other computer models that are out there are wrong, and it doesn't warm more in the Eastern Pacific, then these circulation changes may or may not occur. So that's why, so to be completely candid and honest with everybody, there is some uncertainty in this. We don't know for sure if it's going to pan out this way. And I think it's responsible to tell people that this is the truth about this.
Yeah.
So I think I bring that up only because I want to address people's concerns about the climate models. This is the truth.
So my question for that is could the warming be relative? Since it's cooling right now, could the warming be relative to just kind of get it back up to where it was?
It should have been warming already. We don't know why. The observations say that it's cooling in the Eastern Pacific, but all the climate models insist that it's going to warm. But it could switch at any moment. Yeah. At any moment, something could happen in the climate system that the computer models end up being right in the future. And I would say that the community is about 50-50 split on how that's going to work out. But it is one of the bigger controversies in climate science right now is how is the Eastern Pacific going to respond to climate change in the future? And so when I got these results from Karthik Balaguru, who's the scientist that did this study back last year in the spring, when I asked him about this, I said, can we really trust the results if we know that the warming in the Eastern Pacific is something that may or may not occur in the future? Can we really trust the models? And he says, I think that the best that we can do is trust that the models are correct about this overall general pattern change in the future. And if we put our trust in the models, then this is what the models spit out as a result in the future. We don't know. But what I can say is heavier rainfall, for sure. That is going to happen with a warmer climate. There's no doubt about that. You simply just need to do math for that. Stronger hurricanes, very likely that's going to happen. The one thing I would say becomes a little bit more uncertain is whether the circulation changes will truly be the way the computer models say, such that these storms have more of a tendency to move towards the southeast coast and especially the state of Florida. That's what I would say is the greatest uncertainty here. But there are some things that the models are showing which I think are virtually certain that are going to happen in the future. Yeah.
And with the change in circulation, how does that play out further into the Atlantic? Does that change our formation zones? Does it cause any disruption in the way that we typically watch storms move across the Atlantic?
I think for sure. Yeah, I think for sure. And I think we're starting to see signs of it this year. I think, we use rules of thumb, right? When there's a La Nina, we get more landfalling hurricanes. When there's an El Nino, we have less overall hurricanes and less landfalling hurricanes. Well, that didn't work last year, and it's not working this summer. So I think what we're seeing here is because the Atlantic over the past 2 years and the overall climate system has been so much warmer. I mean, we made a huge jump last year, huge jump in temperatures, and we're there again this year. It's almost like the old rules and the statistics that we use to form these rules of thumb are not working anymore. So I think we're going to witness, and we are witnessing, a full-scale change probably in the way that the climate operates because it's reached really critical levels of warming now, such that things are not going to operate the way that they generally have for the past 50 years or so. That's my opinion. And I think there are a lot of meteorologists who are thinking, scratching their heads and saying, why didn't it work last year? And why is it not working this year again?
Yeah, unprecedented temperatures. And I think we all just assumed that warmer meant more, warmer meant,
That's
a
right.
busier season.
Yeah.
But unprecedented is unprecedented for a reason. Like we've never done this warm. So we didn't really know what was going to happen this season. And so far it has led to a really, really weird season.
It has. Africa is so wet right now. The Sahara Desert is getting floods.
Yeah.
What is going on there? Brazil is by far the driest they've ever been over the last year, by far the driest they've ever been. Climate patterns are acting very strange all over the world, and it's affecting the Atlantic Ocean, by the way. When you have tropical waves that instead of moving across the intertropical convergence zone are moving northwest off the northwest coast of Africa into the Sahara Desert and eventually towards Portugal, something weird is happening. And the best hurricane experts in the world are like, what is going on? And we have ideas for why it's happening. So, Rebecca, by the way, this hurricane study wasn't just for the Tampa Bay area. I did it for Houston, New Orleans, Fort Myers, Miami, and also Charleston. You want to go through some of those numbers?
Yeah, we have one question real quick, and I know that you know the answer to it. This is from Lynn. She says, can you tell the insurance companies to slow down on the price jumps? And that was another part of this.
It was, and I mean, look, if an insurance company is thinking that the chance that your home's going to be hit by a major hurricane only once every 100 years, but then they know in the future, and believe me, they know, they know all the numbers, that your home is going to be subject to a major hurricane once every 30 years, well, that's a completely different ball game. It's a completely different calculation. So they know where we're headed in the future. Even if we don't get that many more hurricanes, even if the hurricanes are just simply more intense with more heavy rainfall, they know that those costs are going to increase dramatically in the future. Okay, so I brought up the Tampa numbers before. Let me bring up the numbers for Fort Myers. Okay, Fort Myers actually, I think their numbers are even more impressive than us.
Oh, wow.
A 260% increase in major hurricanes. So instead of one every 80 years, it's one every 22 years or something.
Wow.
An 85% increase in hurricanes, a 45% increase in tropical storm force winds. This is an average of each county. Each county had different numbers. Like Collier County might have had 280, and then Lee County may have been 240, and I just averaged them. But it was broken. The data is broken down by the county. Maximum wind speed increases of 18% and maximum rain rates of 50%, similar to Tampa on that. This next one, let me pull it up.
Would you account the difference between us and Fort Myers to geography, the fact that they stick out a little more than we do?
They're further south.
Further south? Okay.
It turns out, and you'll see that with Miami. Look at Miami's numbers. Almost identical.
Yeah.
A little bit worse, actually, than Fort Myers' numbers. 260% increase, so 3 to 4 times the amount of major hurricane strikes. Hurricanes, 110%. Remember, we were something like, 70%-ish?
Yes.
So as you go further south, what we found in this study is your hurricane risk increases more dramatically. Tropical storms increase 50%, so that's the incidence of tropical storm force winds in any county on average in the Miami area. Actually, it was that major hurricanes, 300% for the Keys.
Wow.
I had to exclude the Keys to keep the number at 260%. I just did Miami-Dade and Broward. Miami-Dade was like 280%. Broward was like 240%, and the Keys were close to 300%. So anyway, point is, the further south you go, consistently we find a greater threat for a greater increase in hurricanes. Maximum wind speeds about a 20% increase. Rain rates about a 50% increase. Now I'm going to bring up New Orleans. And in this case, we don't see as dramatic an increase.
Interesting.
A 2 to 3 times increase, though, still a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, somewhere between 2 and 2.5 or so of major hurricanes. 60% increase in hurricanes, and so on and so forth. Maximum wind speed rates and the max rain rates are a little bit slightly less than Tampa. At least the rain rates are. Things change a little bit when you get to Charleston and New Orleans. Look at Charleston's numbers. Out of all the cities, they see the least increase, but they still have an increase. It's still a significant increase, about a 1.6 times increase in the incidence of major hurricanes. 30% increase in hurricanes, 22% increase tropical storms. Look at the max wind speeds. Instead of like 15 to 20%, only a 5% increase in maximum wind speeds there. And rainfall rates, instead of a 50% increase, it's closer to a 35%. So you can clearly see the further north you go, and also, by the way, a different coast, right? This is the southeast coast. And there's one more I want to show you, which is Houston. And then we'll kind of we'll end it there and we'll take some questions. Houston sees a similar increase to New Orleans, I would say. 135% increase in major hurricanes, so 2 to 3 times more. Max wind speeds, instead of like Tampa was close to 15 to 20%, but Houston's closer to a 10% increase. Max rainfall rates similar, about 45%. Tampa was about 50% or so. All right, so those are all the numbers. Do you have any? I'm curious, what kind of questions do you have, Rebecca?
I'm really curious about the Charleston being the weakest increase, and I was wondering how and also I thought New Orleans would have been higher based on what you showed with the change in flow. It looked like that storms would have been slung into the Panhandle, into New Orleans more often and more likely with that flow.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, remember that this change in steering overall is a very much an average change in steering, but it makes a lot of sense. I think what it may be is that Florida itself is just seeing a lot more storms. And so because we're part of Florida on the West Coast up here, that we're a part of this zone that's getting the largest increase. But yes, you're right too. And it seems to have something to do with latitude. For some reason, the further south you are in the U.S., you see a much greater increase in the incidence of these storms. I don't know exactly what. These are some of the unanswered questions. I myself was wondering about that too. I was like, why are we seeing it here in Tampa and Fort Myers? But again, that's very broad. That let me show you the graphic that she's talking about. I'll bring it up. This is just very, very broad. Here it is. I'll bring it up for you. Very broad generality of how the wind speeds, the wind will change in the future. But I can totally understand why you feel that way. You would think that you'd see more of those storms moving towards New Orleans.
And then did you guys look at the positioning or the movement of the Bermuda High with this change?
Yeah, so what we end up with, the reason why, let me go back to this graphic again. The reason why we end up with this counterclockwise flow is there's an upper level cyclone that develops way up in the atmosphere right over Central America and the Caribbean. And then the opposite happens further east of that. We get an anticyclone or an area of high pressure that forms out there. We did not specifically look, though, at the change in, or at least I didn't look at it that closely, how the Bermuda High specifically would change. More, I was focused on how this upper level low would form across Central America and the Caribbean and tend to push more of those storms our way. But it is a good point. Believe me, you can dig really deep and get really in the weeds on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It gets fascinating. The deeper you go and you get a little bit more nitty gritty. And I'm just going to address some of the comments because I know you and you're not a fearmonger. You're getting accused of fearmongering here.
Yeah,
and
I always
you're
do.
Not. Yeah.
Well, okay, so Rebecca sits across from me every day.
Yep.
Am I a nervous, anxious person?
No.
Have you ever seen me scared?
No.
It's kind of the opposite. Actually, I've always said this. The reason I do this is because I am so intrigued and curious about this. Rebecca will tell you this. I live, eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff.
Yep.
You know, I'm a total nerd, I would say. I just have a tremendous interest in this stuff. And so but the other part of this, and Rebecca knows this, for me, it's very much a moral and ethical thing. I believe it my job to be honest with people about the findings. I believe in science. It lands us on the moon. It gets us to Mars. You know, it cures diseases. So I think it's my moral and ethical and journalistic obligation to bring the truth to you. So there's two things going on. I firmly believe that someone like me with my science background and my platform in the media is in the exact perfect place, and it is my responsibility to bring you the honest truth, even if it is inconvenient and even if you don't like to hear it. I think otherwise it would almost like be going to a doctor and the doctor being like, I don't want to tell this guy he has cancer because that's bad news, and I'm going to be honest with you. That it's as simple as that. But here's the truth. I'm not afraid at all. And I'm not dramatic. Rebecca, do you consider me a dramatic person?
No, I'm the dramatic one of the crowd.
Are you? Okay. She likes that. Yeah. So I'm not dramatic either. So it's actually couldn't be further from the truth. I just am really interested in this stuff. I want to teach everyone the science. That's, why I'm at Weather Prof, because I want to be an educator of people. But I also think it's my moral and journalistic responsibility to bring you the honest truth. That is the truth. I have no other reason for doing what I do. I think that we don't realize the situation that we put ourselves in. I don't think people quite understand that when you change, let's say, the water temperatures by 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit in 50 years, how that will metastasize in coming decades and come back to haunt us in various ways, whether it be shortages of food or shortages of water or political issues because people are trying to migrate out of their country or whatever. I don't think people quite understand, and I just want people to have that information, and I believe it my obligation to tell them that, okay? So,
yeah.
Would you describe that? I'm just asking because it's a good time to address that elephant. You sit across from me all the time. You can be blatantly honest with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think is the reason that I do this?
I think that you understand that no one else is doing this. There's no one in your position with your background that has the ability to communicate this information, and that's why you're here, and that's what you do. And you walk through hateful comments on Facebook all the time because that's not important to you. Communicating what's accurate and helping people prepare for what you expect is more important to you.
I honestly am just trying to help the world. I swear I'm just trying to help the world. And the world fights back so much, and every day it's a slog as someone like me, because you do have to contend with these comments, and people think that you have an agenda. Yeah. And I am just trying to help everyone to help themselves. That is all. Yeah. But I don't care. That's fine. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. I have a really thick skin, and I've learned to just ignore the negative comments.
And we have a great question actually asking, how is this different from historical climate change from the past that we've seen with the warmer
These are all great questions. It's happening so much faster these days, like 100 times faster than it really ever has. I mean, we see ice ages. Sea levels used to be 400 feet lower off of Tampa just 20,000 years ago during the max ice age when all the water was locked up in the ice. You could walk about 100 miles offshore of Tampa and you'd still be on the sand on the beach. So climate changes, but it changes over tens of thousands of years, not 100 years, not 50 years, which is where most of the climate changes happen. It is the dramatic pace of climate change and the tipping points that exist within our system that could be tipped. And once we tip, there's no going back anytime within hundreds of generations, actually. So, and I also realize that, we have 8 billion people in this world that are all reliant on a specific system, and the system works a certain way. And when all of a sudden everything is thrown off kilter within a couple of decades, it causes strife, tremendous strife. That's what I'm most worried about in the future. It's not so much that one storm, right? It's that one storm, that one drought, that one heat wave, that one, crop loss, that it's all of it piled up and a lot more of it in the future, that compound threat. That's what I'm worried about. So, yes. So did I answer that question?
I think so.
Things change really slowly, naturally, really slowly, over tens of thousands of years. But right now they're changing at like 100 times the pace, if not.
And you addressed this last night when you aired this originally. It's going to take global collaboration to course correct.
Yeah. I mean, look, I love telling people to change their light bulb just as much as the next person, but that's not going to do anything. This is going to involve societal change, okay? It truly is going to involve all the infighting to kind of end, and for us to say what's best for this world is we need to come together and reduce our addiction to fossil fuels, reduce our burning of fossil fuels so that we can bring temperatures. You might not be able to bring them down right away, but at least we can stabilize temperatures and not make it so much worse in the future. And yes, China, they burn more fossil fuels than us. They release more emissions than us. In the long haul, we've released a lot more emissions than them, but now they're starting to catch up. And now, specifically at this moment, their emissions are higher than us. But they're also leading more so in renewable energy than we are in the United States. We're doing better now over the past couple of years, but China is leading the world by far. Like, you add up the rest of the world and compare it to China, China's still doing more renewable energy. So yes, they're villains in the fact that they're burning more fossil fuels and they're putting more pollution out. But in a way, they're heroes because they are such a need for energy in China that they have to walk and chew gum. They have to burn fossil fuels and more of them at the same time as they're producing more renewable energy than everyone else. This battle between who's going to be the winner in the renewable energy space, the United States or China in the future, is truly what is going to fuel a lot of the success or lack of success that we have in fighting climate change. So it's that economic battle. Who can win this battle to win the green future? That is going to determine how fast we're able to combat climate change. Because as everyone knows, it always comes down to money.
Yep.
Yep. It always does.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No, everything's looking pretty quiet right now in the comment section.
So what I'm going to do is, before we come to a close here, I'm going to put the graphic for Tampa up one more time because we are a Tampa TV station. These are the expected changes according to the study. I would encourage you to go to our website, go to the weather tab, then click on Climate Classroom, and you'll find the latest article in Climate Classroom, which addresses this. And all the caveats are there. You know, the uncertainties, all the specific numbers for all the different locations. They're all there, so make sure you go to WFLA.com, read it for yourself. I may not have covered everything that I could potentially cover in this particular broadcast, so I just want you to see I'm very candid about the things that we know and the things that we don't know. So again, I want to thank you at home for joining us. Rebecca, of course, thank you for joining me today. We're going to do another on Tuesday. We're going to do this Tracking the Tropics. We're going to talk about this again. So if you want to join back in, please do so. Thank you for joining Climate Classroom, and I'll see you again next week.
Watch or listen to Jeff's Climate Classroom, powered by Armor View Window and Door on WFLA social media platform.